Architect, sure. Episode number 12. So we got three architects and a physicist slash mathematician, but all of us are very interested in architecture.
Yeah, you could say that.
So Nir, where are you licensed? In Maryland?
I'm licensed in Maryland, yes.
Okay.
As if the license has any meaning other than getting sued, actually.
Oh man. Ann was saying something
I,
similar.
I think that they completely abuse the term architect, and actually people who are trained now in the so-called field are trained in creating unsustainable and unusable and stressful, stress-making, intentionally stress-making environments. Um, And I don't understand why such malpractice is being promoted and licensed, actually. It's a license to hurt people. It's very funny. But I keep my license in order to, I keep my license in order to be able to use the term architect legally in the US with my name.
Yeah, that was the reason for me to get it also. Because I would always dance around the word before I would say building design or things like environmental design, things like that. But it was like when I was finally licensed, it's like, okay, I could use the word architecture. I'm an architect.
Yeah.
And it seems, well, there was one exam in particular called project planning and design that actually focused on the large scale, like the testing that was on the larger scale. There was one exam in particular that it had questions related to the human experience a little bit. But then all the other exams, they were mostly about the details. Like it was like, okay, what kind of rebar are you putting in this concrete? And it was like doing things so you don't get sued. So it's like, okay, I'll write on this detail C structural S dash 3.0 for the spec on the foundations or whatever on the building section. So it's like it's the other exams are about like I guess knowing what you're liable for and finding out how to limit your liability. I don't know. And then I think also people a lot of times when we think about fixing our built environment, it's something that's going to take decades to fix. So that's why some people don't get too excited about the issue because it's like, okay, the buildings around us are already constructed. For us to think about doing a better built environment, it's something that's going to happen a few decades down the line, if at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's your generation that I think is comfortable talking about this in a way that the boom generation was not. Because I think what I see is young people are very open to talking about stress, health and well-being. You're into looking at it. And even there are new words now. I mean, the term neurodiversity didn't even exist when I went to architecture school. I mean, there's just so much more awareness now.
It
And there's so
probably
much
doesn't.
interested in health. I think there's much more, since COVID, much more talk about healthy environments than ever before.
Yeah.
How can we help you, Ara?
I want to
Well,
interject with something because we have Nir joining us following a conversation with Ara because we showed Ara some buildings by Nir, and Ara said these are fantastic buildings. What don't we know about them? So we have a wonderful contemporary buildings being built today that are really human scale and gorgeous and beautiful, and the architecture world doesn't know about them. So that's a crime, really. So that's what we're here to talk about.
yes, true. That large building on the ground level, I loved how it had those pockets and it had like semi-enclosed, semi-open space, and it had like a lot of articulation. But how you guys can help me is by teaching me. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn as much as I can from you guys. And then hopefully a decade from now or a couple decades from now, look back and be like, I didn't miss the mark. Like my design work like just improved because of these conversations.
Yeah, but Ara, there's a bigger problem here. You have come into contact with us through chance meetings. Otherwise, you would not have learned all this stuff. Here, we're talking
Yeah.
about the future of human scale architecture. You could have missed it. And most of your contemporaries have missed it. They have no idea what's going on.
It's true. Yeah. Nikos, you said something like architects are obsessed with hero worship. And it's true. For me, it was like I was obsessed with studying the work of Lebbeus Woods and Tom Main and a bunch of other architects. Like,
And tell me about your experience with that. How satisfying was it for you to engage in it?
how satisfying. It was. I mean, it was. I mean, I still think those artists and architects do work that's magnificent in some way. Like I
Okay.
think Tom Main's work in some ways it is magnificent. I think Neil Denari's work in a lot of ways is magnificent, and I
When
think
you say
Levius was.
magnificent, is that something you feel as goodness or something that you recognize as an intellectual achievement?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I
Ara, how can a building that is sadistic, that's designed to make the users anxious, how can that be a magnificent achievement?
But what also I always think is if I put a bunch of like Frank Gehry or Tom Main buildings in a city and just made a city of them, it'd be a dystopia.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. It
It'd be a
shouldn't be
total
every building.
dystopia. Whereas you take a
Okay,
traditional architecture, it's never dystopian.
Versus
It's
when you
always
so
take which architecture
dystopia.
is never dystopian?
Traditional architecture.
Oh,
And what I've seen in where I live in Massachusetts, the areas that have zoning bylaws that prohibit modern architecture have higher real estate valuation. So the island of Nantucket banned all modern architecture in 1972. Now the average house price in Nantucket is $4 million. It's been bought by a Wall Street venture capitalists, and the streets are beautiful. They're just beautiful. But now beauty has become, in my generation, I'm the baby boom generation, only for the wealthy. They get it.
actually, it's really interesting to continue in your vein. I've been speaking to Black people who really have almost no voice in the built environment and saying that urban equity is equal beauty for all. And they
Yes.
really like that idea. So, Ara, you're looking at classical music without knowing how to read notes. You can enjoy the cadence, you can enjoy the harmonies, the melodies, what have you, but you want to understand how it's put together and compose maybe in a way like that. So you need to become like reading literacy and musical literacy. Um, you need to become architecturally literate. And we're here to help you with that. Architectural literacy is a very simple proposition. I don't know if you saw one of my little presentations on it. It has very few rules, and there's very little for you to learn, and a lifetime of learning to understand, practice. It's a holistic system. It's a genuine holistic system. It has always worked. It's been codified and at the basis of discourse for 2,500 years. And it's always worked. It's worked well. It never failed, actually.
I agree.
The other thing, Era, I certainly don't want to cut you off here. The other thing you can do, I think you should definitely follow up with what Nir's saying. The other thing is, because the AIA National Convention is happening in Boston in 2025 in June, it'll be in Boston, and we have a booth with iMotions. We're looking to do some eye tracking studies. And they want to do some eye tracking pilot studies. So if you have colleagues or at your firm or at your school, we could do a pilot eye tracking study that compares anything you want to compare, traditional, modern.
Oh, I'd love to do some of that.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Well, we should maybe arrange a phone call because there's not much time. It's already February, but we could get the study up so that we can show people right now. iMotions and Justin Hollander, who I've worked with at Tufts, they're both presenting. It could get presented at our booth. It could get presented. So the architects don't even know that you can measure stress, that they're designing hospitals where in Boston, I don't know if you know this, a year and a half ago, a woman died on the steps of the hospital. She had an asthma attack and she could not find the door. So they started a nonprofit in her name because the hospital is so poorly designed that people ill can't find the door. But you know that the ugliest building in my town is the hospital. The building with the least feelings is the people designed for human health. It was supposed to be promoting human health. I mean, the contradiction is huge. So if you want to even do something on hospital design, we could talk. But what's really important about that, we can do a pilot study and then apply for a big grant.
Okay, cool.
We should definitely do it. What we need are really good images that you have the rights to.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I could try to take some photographs.
So
And
maybe we could talk next week about it and try to get something up because we could do something fascinating. It could be your firm's work, your student work, the before and after, or examples of Nir's work. We could do a traditional versus a modern hospital. Which one do you find the front door on more easily, intuitively?
yeah, big time. And then we need to address modern hospitals not having operable windows, which is crazy. All the new hospitals here don't have operable windows.
They don't.
They're
Well,
all
that would
fixed.
be illegal in Germany. In
Yeah, I
Germany,
remember you
it's
telling me.
illegal to
Yeah.
build any commercial or residential building without operable windows. For the United States, that's what we're building more and more.
Yeah, we kind of are doing what we're doing for whatever reasons. And we're stuck in a rut of trendiness that nobody even knows why it ever happened. Nobody knows why. You're taught that doing traditional stuff is evil, basically is wrong. Nobody asks why.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. It's just like the rush to drive cars, the rush to be modern, the rush to make plastics. I don't know if you just saw that now they're linking microplastics in the brain to increase risk of dementia. That apparently as we age, we all have a tablespoon of microplastics in our brain. It's just
probably not surprising. We're doing a lot of harm. But in any event, to climb out of the hole, we actually are part of a movement who are people who are conscious of all this. It's the new traditional movement. One of the actors in it is the Architecture Uprising. One of the actors in it is Intibau. One of the actors in it is the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. The CPI, obviously, happy.org are doing great work. Nikos and his colleagues are doing good work. We're going to meet in Oslo on May 2, 3, 4 for the Beauty and Ugliness in Architecture Conference. I think it would blow your mind, seriously blow your mind to be there, because you will actually physically meet the young people who are all about fixing the world.
we need to do it. So I'm going to that conference with Nir. Nir, you're going, right?
We're among the organizers, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to that conference. And just to prepare for the conference, last night I did watch a little video about Oslo, and oh my God, it's being destroyed.
Well,
it's just being destroyed by its modern.
Every place is. It's really laughable. It's ongoing. People are so unconscious of what they're producing. It's just extraordinary.
They're just so miseducated. The rush to just embrace the modern. It's like the rush to embrace, bread without wheat germ, not realizing, no, you actually need the wheat germ.
Can I show you guys a building real quick that I find interesting? This is a building in New York City. It's
oh my God, that's terrible.
On the High Line.
Oh my
But
God.
when you look closely, you see that there is articulation all along the facade. It's not a blank steel facade. There are curves embedded into it.
How would you describe that articulation?
It looks like it looks like a plane crashed into it.
There's sheet metal, and in the sheet metal there is a curve that's embedded into it, and the curve embedded into it actually looks similar to the silhouette of the building. And then there's another view.
Okay, so listen.
This is the other view. Yeah.
Oh my God, I wouldn't want to live across from that building. You could actually do a study that showed living across from that building and seeing it every day will decrease your longevity.
That on the beauty scale, when you look at that building, what's the first number that came to mind? 1 to 10. Just tell me the first number that already came to mind. Yeah.
-0.1.
Yeah. For you. The first number.
Like an 8.
I got
really?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But
Um,
a city full of buildings like that would be totally dystopian.
that building
I
is
agree.
bad. That building is probably bad for you. We are discovering things, curious things that the modernist work simply doesn't address. For example, you probably don't want to see a lot of metal in the built environment. It's probably not good for you. I can't tell you why right now, but I can tell you that building actually is probably, it stresses you out beyond recognition. You think it's eight because you were trained to look at it as an intellectual exercise, and it fits it you know, it checks all the boxes. But architecture is actually about experience. The intellectual aspects of it, as important as they may be, are just that. You don't need to intellectualize your love for somebody. You don't need to intellectualize your love for a baby. You don't need to intellectualize anything that has to do with your actual experience.
So,
What
so here's
you,
the fascinating thing about the science, though, just to support what Nir's saying. They now know that before you consciously even know what you're looking at, your heart rate, your breath rate, pupil dilation, your heart rate, your breath rate, your pupil dilation, your stress glands are already responding.
That makes sense.
and we have actually,
The reason that building will living across from it could just like they now know that if you live next to a noisy street with a lot of cars, you're going to have, they now know there's a number, the decreased longevity, the sound. Because what happens is the stress hormones are going off before you even realize they're there. It's really fascinating. There was a mayor in Boston who hated working in the brutalist Boston City Hall. He really hated the building. But he worked there for many years, decades, and then he retired from working in the building he hated, and he died like 9 months later from cancer. So what happens is the stress gland responding, the overcortisol primes the cells to be more responsive to cancer. So basically, that even that metal building, I believe I would like to work on getting an attachment index for building facades. That's an avoidant architecture, non-consciously. That's going to release, you can measure the stress gland response, not even a conscious, that architects are creating.
Franklin, get up, Franklin.
I like what you said, one of the things, and what that people think that we're thinking beings that feel. No, we're feeling beings that think. So it's like
Yes.
our subconscious that really rules the majority of our feelings and thoughts.
Yeah, and at the Harvard, I could send you a link from a Harvard psychologist. You should always call it the unconscious, not the subconscious.
Oh, the unconscious. Okay.
Yes, unconscious.
Let me change the topic and bring out a very important point here. Ara is our friend. He presented a very ugly building to us and said it's a nice building, and we all disagreed with him. Then Nir, instead of tuning out, gave a masterful description of why this building is not very nice. Okay, that's our group. We can explain things. We don't get upset. We're trying to educate our friends.
Yes.
That's very different from the standard architecture that is intolerant of any criticism. You see the difference here?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all open to having the conversation and
Right.
sharing our thoughts, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
The
in order
problem
to
is
have
it's a false paradigm, but the problem is they're making so much money. The architecture firms building the modernism, they don't even want to look. I gave a talk at Sasaki last month. That's a major firm in Boston. I think they also have a firm on the West Coast. And an older guy got up from my talk and walked out. And he says, "Where is the science here?" And I was talking to him about the 3M visual attention software that's a plugin for Photoshop that he couldn't even accept. It's now a plugin for that tells you scientifically where people will look in the first 3 to 5 seconds. Okay. And because the first 3 to 5 seconds we look at anything, it's exactly like a monkey. Anyway,
and please let Nir talk because he's our his first appearance on our little webinar.
No, but the point is that they don't want to even look at this science being here.
Look, I have a PhD in modern design history and theory. And when I was writing it, I asked, what is modernist architecture? And the answers I found were really interesting. because we're driving through a major snowstorm, by the way. And Luann's doing a really awesome job. We found out that there's not a single modernist idea that originated after 1865, not one. And it's all romanticism rehashed with a change of style, and it was an arbitrary change of style for whatever reasons suited. It was a German movement, basically. It's a German style. It's not, there's nothing international about it. It's been abused internationally, but it's a German style that was invented for purposes of actually the self-aggrandizement of its practitioners, not the service of people.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a problem. And we have, to kind of take responsibility for that and see how we get, how the chicken's going to cross the road here. I propose that the easiest way to cross the road is, first of all, to become architecturally literate so that you can actually name those things you're looking at on that metal building and understand how they are abusing your mentality, because you'll have a name for it. And it's not highfalutin scientific names. It's very accessible and not many. Put the car here and I'll park it.
All right, I have a
Just
question.
put it in here. I'll
So,
park it. That's
so the
perfect.
brutalist building is not healthy. The building that has the exposed is just concrete and glass. And then the contemporary building that's all metal and glass is not healthy. But then we look at our environments,
Just
not
a
just the
moment, guys.
buildings,
Just a moment,
like
guys.
our the keyboards we're using and the laptops, like the silver shiny metal laptops and microphones and our desktop computers. And it's like everything around us, it looks like the modern building. Like the
Yeah.
building, like the iPhone, and the iPhone looks kind of like a lot of the contemporary buildings. It's like there's a an ethos, or like there's something about just the way we're designing everything now. And our even our graphic design, it's all reflected. It's all kind of similar in a way. It's all very minimal, and it has a contemporary type of, I don't know what the correct word is for the contemporary feeling, but there's something across all design fields right now.
Yeah, the word is ugly, but listen, Ara, when I look around campus, because I go to teach every week, I see 1,000 students carrying their iPhones, and they have bought pretty colored covers for their iPhones. So they undo this ugly style by purchasing a very beautiful cover. Okay? So the manufacturer makes an ugly phone that's just black or silver, and the students buy a pretty cover because it's more attractive. That underlines the fundamental need for beauty in the objects that you use every day. And some of my students even buy covers for their laptops. You know, you can buy some very pretty covers for the laptops. And where do those designs come from? Traditional textile designs for, made in plastic, and you stick them on your laptop.
I will do it in a moment. I need to move myself. Sorry, guys.
No
No, it's okay.
problem.
So what is the equivalent of the cover on the building? So the cover would be like the small scale ornamented detail that would be on the exterior and the interior of the building.
You need minimum two things. You need small scale ornamental detail, and you also need some coherence, some composition. That building has no composition. It's just, brutal and ugly.
But what you really need is, because more of our brain, as Eric Kandel, the Nobel Prize winner, says in his book, Age of Insight, he's a neuroscientist, won a Nobel Prize. What you really need, it has to be face-like. I mean, the term facade means face. And the human brain is hardwired, it needs mirroring. We're not supposed to be alone. We're supposed to be mirrored. We're a social species. So that's why it's fascinating to look at, or even the postcards at Harvard Square. Do you think there's a postcard of a Gropius building at Harvard Square, at the Harvard Coop? No. Do you think there's a postcard of the Le Corbusier building at the Harvard Coop? No. The postcards are of the 18th and 19th century traditional, brick buildings, and that's what says Harvard. And they're so beautiful, they even make placemats of them. And then the cheapest dorms, the dorms that are the students least want to be in and are the least expensive, are the gropiest dorms. And they feel like a factory. I've been in them. It feels
It's
like a factory.
crazy. And he's one of the, if you ask most architects, they'll say like, oh, he's one of the greatest of all time. And it's why are architects like Walter Gropius and Le Corbusier like the ones that we most talk about? It's
Because we
crazy.
talked about that, and I've talked about that because what happened, war gave us our world.
Yeah.
War gave us our world, and what happened is we run from war. We don't want to talk about it, and that's also a PTSD response that you can't. It wasn't until after my parents' passing that I learned things in my family. Well, why was that? Well, that's because it's a normal way of human responding. They don't want to look at things in the past. So World War I was catastrophic, and then 20 years later, World War II, 60
And
million deaths.
there is another factor that's very important that we have to take into account. Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius were masters of advertising and self-promotion. They didn't know anything about architecture, but they knew about self-promotion. That's all they
But
did
you
all their
also have
lives.
to understand that it couldn't have happened. I read this great book that explained Le Corbusier couldn't have happened without the collapse after World War I.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the world collapsed. Also, I think you got mass death of the arts and crafts class. Remember, mass death. And the civilization collapsed. 20 years later, World War II, civilization totally collapsed. And there's this rush to be, drive cars, no seatbelts, leaded gas. And my father's first job as an engineer, he got a PhD from Columbia. His first job was, what was he doing? He was making plastics. Just like in The Graduate, the movie is plastics. We were just rushing to like this embrace industrialization, not realizing it doesn't fit our biological ecosystem or our emotional ecosystem at all.
Yes.
But then you have to.
However, to place this into context, imagine yourself as Gropius or Le Corbusier or Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. You're at the right point at the right time. The world is waiting for a change, and you can offer them the
You could
dream,
offer that you had it. Yeah, it was a
the
magic
new
pill.
architecture. Exactly, the new architecture solves all the world's problems, even if it's toxic. It's
Oh, I
toxic
have to
like a
tell you a story,
microplastic.
guys. I have to tell you this story that just happened to me. This just blew my mind. So I don't know if you know, but in Massachusetts, the flu peaks in February. And a month ago, I got the flu, even though I got the vaccine. Okay. And so I had to go to the emergency room and they said, okay, we're going to tell you exactly what flu you have. There are four kinds of flu, A, B, C, and D. And they said to me, you have flu A. And I said, what's flu A? Flu A is the same flu as the pandemic in 1918 to
Whoa.
1920.
Oh
So
no!
I
she has a historic
had the historic flu.
flu.
Now I get it. I lost the ability to breathe.
Look,
Really?
Ara,
Yeah.
look, Ara, we
And that was
have
just, and so when you have not only the war, then the pandemic where they think 50 million or more people died. That happens by 1920.
Yeah, 1918 flu.
1919, 1920. I mean,
I,
it
I,
just
I need to excuse myself. I'm going in with Luann, but I did want to say that you're in very, very good hands here, and they're going to tell you more stories than you can put in your bowl for one day, and they're all right. The what happened and why it happened. I mean, I've been studying this for about 20, 30 years. James Stevens Coral also. You probably want to read. You need to read. You need to read history. I'm actually reading right now about the Renaissance, and it was a miserable period, historically speaking. It was really a mess. The World War I era was a real huge disaster. We're still fighting it.
we're still
Um,
fighting World War I. That's so
yeah,
interesting you said that because Channel 2, the PBS, because of the centenary of World War I in 2018, they put out a documentary about World War I, showing repurposed films of World War I. And anyway, make a long story short, their conclusion was just what Nir said: the impact of World War I is contemporary.
it was a real a shock to the system, whatever it was. But let me throw some more stuff at you. I actually wound up when I wrote my book. I researched technology, transportation technology. I might stop talking mid-sentence the moment Luann goes in. And it turns out that the current leapfrogging of technology that we experience already happened 150 years ago in the Industrial Revolution. The revolution we have today, we think is a digital revolution, but it might be an anti-industrial revolution, a counter-industrial revolution, because it's taking the industry out of it. And industry always involves people, and digitization takes people out of the thing. So I think I need to stop now. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nir.
Thank you, Nir. But I think that idea that we don't look at how war gave us our world, I think I might have told you this, the bestseller, New York Times bestseller of 2020, War, How Conflict Shaped Us by Margaret Macmillan. She's a retired Oxford University professor, and it's all about how we don't look at how war gave us our world. And that we need to a successful vision of the future isn't possible without an accurate knowledge of the past. We don't really look at it.
It's funny how we see like how your father, like his when he was a chemical engineer, he was doing like the work was plastics, and then it's like our whole thing is making something that's contemporary. It's like it sounds like in the Bible when God said, "Okay, you have all these trees, just don't eat from that one." It's like, and then we want to eat from that one particular tree. It's like we know that plastics are bad, and then all these like metals around us, but it's like, okay, that's what we're gonna do anyway.
Yeah, and then there was the push to, again, after World War II, this huge push to car centrism and a car in every garage and non-evidence-based urban planning that is killing America. I think I heard somewhere that we have the highest carbon footprint, much higher than many times higher than any country in Europe because of our car centrism. But why did that happen? Because of war. Because the Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, the book by Charles Maroon, he talks about how I might have told you this, after World War II, the car companies were terrified they were going to go back into 29, 39 depression because what got them out of the depression was making armaments and tanks. And then all of a sudden, 1945, they get no more money from the government. What are we going to do? We got to have a car in every garage because they saw they were going to go back to the depression. So they pivoted, not knowing that, the human brain is hardwired. I told you that Dan Lieberman at Harvard, evolutionary biologist, says the male body evolved to walk 12 miles a day, the female 9. Now, most Americans don't do that. And because of that, it's a contributing factor. I just saw this, we've now fallen to 49th in longevity worldwide. We have the lowest longevity. And now we're up to 42% of all adults qualifying as obese. It's incredible how we designed a built.
Yes, I'm sorry. And I want to interrupt you because we're going to run out of time. And I want to ask Ara, just to make a concluding statement. Nir kindly intervened from the middle of a snowstorm and gave some gems. And I want to know, Ara, are you ready to respond to those gems that Nir gave us?
Yeah. I mean,
Or are you still digesting them?
well, definitely, yeah, still digesting them. So
The hope for a beautiful built future with beautiful buildings, with explanation for why a building is beautiful and why it's ugly. It's ugly because it affects our health negatively.
yeah. Yeah, but so I like spent so much time looking at buildings like these and like maybe it's just I've like readjusted. It's like when you're in darkness, like your pupils adjust to the situation around you. So it's like I've spent the majority of my time looking at buildings that were made out of steel or steel and glass or concrete and glass and had a very particular type of style. And then I mean when I see something that's been like labored over, like I know that with that building, like there was so much curvature, and it's like a 50-50 balance between like a jagged edge and the curved edge, and it's like hard and soft together. And it's like when I see it, I'm just, oh my goodness. Like, oh, there's a curve here and against the jagged edge here, and then there's a more, and then there's like a volume that like bulges out of the other volume. So it's like it looks organic and inorganic because it's curves, but at the same time it's steel and glass. And it's just like fascinating to me to like look at that building.
But then Nir said, intellectual fascination does not correspond with what the body feels, and that's
That's
the
true.
long-term health. Long-term exposure to an ugly building is bad for your health. Okay, intellectually you can say, "Oh, this is a cute design, and it's exciting because it's shiny steel." Very, very different emotions, and
But I understand what Ara is saying. The fact is, that building that he showed us, I can see in a way how you might find it attractive just because it's a little bit different than just the ugly ice cube tray templates we're mostly surrounded by.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing, there's so much ugliness in our world today. We become habituated to it. And then when we're suddenly placed in a beautiful environment, people are like shocked. You know, like I told you the story about the 60-year-old American guy who went to Venice for the first time. And he said to me, I walked for an hour and a half. And because he'd never, I mean, just like you, what you were like, just you were saying, Ara, you don't realize this other paradigm is possible. He had no idea paradigm would be possible that would invite him to feel joy just walking. He'd never experienced that in 60 years. So because we're just so miseducated, but also we don't see, but the wealthy get it. The wealthy will go to Nantucket and they'll experience it.
okay, my dear
Yeah.
friends, we're out of time, so I would like to end today. Thanks again. Thanks, Ara, for having these series of webinars. I hope some people are watching them. I read the comments. Some people really, really love these webinars. So,
Yeah.
No, I think it's great, Ara. And also, I'll send you an email by Monday about we can do a quick study. And if you could do it, we got to get the work out that you can actually measure human experience.
that would be
Architects know that.
fantastic. And then we can do a webinar on the study.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I'd love to do some eye tracking studies on buildings that I am fascinated by, and then like see objectively how they're not good for the
Wonderful,
general public.
wonderful.
Let's do
I
it.
think it'd
And
be
then,
great for me.
but Ara, also let's apply for a grant. What I've learned late in life is there are millions, billions of dollars out there looking for places to go. And if we can just phase it as this is going to improve well-being for all ages, for seniors, for people like Nikos and I, we could get a grant.
That's a
But
great
you're
idea.
not going to get it if we don't apply. And also money attracts money. So maybe we'd get a $5,000. Then the next year we'll get a 50,000. We've just got to get them out there.
Sure, let's do it. Yeah.
So let's do
Okay.
it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
So that was conversation number 12 for me with Nikos Salingaros, mathematician who's done a lot of fascinating research in architectural theory. My ninth conversation with Ann Sussman, who is an architect practicing in Massachusetts. And my first conversation, hopefully of many, with Nir Buras, who is an architect practicing in Maryland. It was jam-packed with value. I can't stress enough how much I recommend starting a podcast and making content for everybody out there watching this, listening to this. It's really an indescribable experience to look back on the thoughts you've had and the things you've made and see your progress and how you've evolved. I can't recommend it enough. Peace, love, positivity. See y'all next week.